Eradicate, I usually think pests.
I mean, you hear about eradicate poverty. Does that mean you're going to kill all the poor people?
To them, that is them.
But they're
right?
wrong. Yeah, and you can't convince someone they're wrong by telling them they're right. That's gay.
I don't think it's going to yield good benefit or desired results if you say things are gay in a derogatory way. Because
I think it's just kind of gay.
But even if an alien...
I think this whole conversation
But imagine
an
alien... I would disagree. I think it would cause a lot of people to check out saying something like this.
I don't think I'm saying any crazy stuff. I think I'm saying very reasonable, true stuff. And I think basically everyone is like you. And I think that we're all just afraid of offending some hypothetical third party that doesn't really exist. And I think that is how the left controls the whole dialogue.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all's good wherever you are. In this video, we have Michael Knowles on the Coffee Hour podcast, just dropping truth bombs and totally schooling the two hosts. Let's get into it.
You were doing something similar with Ben, where you would go to colleges and do debates. What were some of the craziest experiences that you've seen?
I had one last night, actually. I was at Vanderbilt here, a local speech. Go in, nice packed auditorium, everyone looks good. I start to give my speech, and out pop these pro-transgender activists. They snuck in. They looked fine, but I don't know, they took their masks off, and they jump up. They all have signs. And the irony was, I was there to give a speech on settler colonialism. So I was actually kind of taken aback. And they were screaming something I couldn't quite tell. And I said, hold on, wait, who are you? And they said, we're the transgender people. And I said, well, it's always the pro-trans crowd. They are by far the craziest protesters I'd ever, the most violent, the most likely to threaten to kill you and everyone you know. And I mean, it's not even close. There's no other issue. Abortion, immigration, colonialism, and nothing touches the trans issue. And so I said, okay, well, why are you protesting me? And it was because of a speech I gave at CPAC, the big conservative conference back in February or March, where I said that for the good of society, and especially for the good of the confused people who fall and prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely, the whole preposterous ideology at every level. Those were the exact words, because I've seen them written in print a lot now. I was accused of calling for genocide. I said, hold on. How do you get that? Rolling Stone accused me of that. Huffington Post accused me of that. Other outlet, Daily Beast, I think. And I said I called for the eradication of an ideology from public life. I didn't call for killing people. Where would you get that? I said, in fact, I prefaced my statement with, for the good, especially of these people who identify as transgender, we got to get rid of this crazy idea. And so eventually all of those libelous outlets had to change their headlines.
I think eradicate is probably a heavy word to use. So I think eradicate, I usually think pests, or I think something in the house like ants. You have an ant calling you, eradicate the ants. Maybe eradicate was too strong of a word.
But you were talking about an ideology and people thought you were talking about a population.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about eradicate poverty. Does that mean you're going to kill all the poor people? We're going to eradicate Nazism. Does that mean you're going to nuke Germany? I don't think so. Eradicate comes from radix, the Latin word radix means root. You can pull it out by the root, which is precisely what I was saying. I don't believe that it's a good idea to merely say, all right, we need to stop transing the 8-year-olds. We need to wait until they turn 9. The 8 is too young, but 18 or whatever, that's fine. No. Either a man can become a woman or he can't. And if a man can become a woman and vice versa, then we should trans the kids. If you can really be born in the wrong body, then for sure we should encourage gender affirming care or whatever else they call it. But if you can't, and we know that you can't, we know that a man can't really be a woman and vice versa, then we shouldn't tolerate it for anyone. It's not going to help anybody. In fact, the largest data set on this ever published just came out of the UK not long ago, and it showed that contrary to popular propaganda, the transgender transition does not alleviate any of the conditions of gender dysphoria. They looked at anxiety, suicidality, depression. They all remain the same, post-hormonal and post-surgical transition. And in one case, in the case of anxiety, it got worse. So I just looked at that in a sober way, and I said, oh, this ideology, which is fairly novel, poses a false view of human nature. It says that your body has nothing to do with who you really are. And so it's harming everyone, it's harming society, and it's harming the individuals who believe in it. So we got to get rid of
Eradicate transgenderism from society. It's funny because I think these people, the trans community, They did this to themselves. They call for trans rights or human rights. They have all the same rights as anybody else in America. There is no rights that a straight white man, for example, has that they don't have. If anything, right now, they have probably, one could make an argument that they have more, because everything we do is to not offend this community. But for the longest time, these people were just other normal human beings in society, like you guys, like I am, with different points of view, obviously a different lifestyle, but no one really cared until they started trying to change language. Then people started to care. When they started to try to change grammar and using the pronouns they, them, language freaking matters. And if you're trying to pass laws that it's hate speech to not call somebody by the proper pronoun, not the proper pronoun, sorry, let me rephrase that, their preferred pronoun, the proper pronoun would be the factual one. When you try to pass those laws, language is used to convey truth. And when you force people to convey an untruth, they're going to care. When you start invading women's spaces and grown men based on a feeling can, quote unquote, become a woman, you can take over women's sports. We're abolishing women's sports right now based on the feelings of some delusional men. People start to care. And the biggest one is when you try to come for our kids. The transitioning of our children, I have no doubt in my mind that in 20 to 50 years from now, this will be looked back upon as the worst issue of a generation. I have no doubt about this. We're going to look back and say, what the hell did these people do to our kids? That's when people started to care. When you started to impose on people's rights, on women's spaces, and on their children. Those were the big three. And I can tell you anecdotally that I know this for almost a pure fact. My wife is Thai. We spend a lot of time in Thailand. We have businesses in Thailand. We own some real estate there. There is more trans people and gay people per capita in Thailand. Maybe not gay, but trans people for sure per capita than anywhere else in the world. And everything just runs fine. Nobody has any issues really with the trans community. And you want to take a guess why? The reason is, one, they don't say that they're women. They're not trying to tell you that a trans woman is a woman. They're happy to be trans people. They call themselves ladyboys. They say they're the third gender. It's fine. No one cares. No laws are being changed. There is no transitioning of the children. There are no laws to call people by certain pronouns. So it's fine. Live your life. Be a productive member of society. I go to my local cafe that I love. The cafe is amazing. The coffee is superb. There's a trans woman that works there. No issues. Who cares? I call this person, by their name, and I doubt they would even care if I called him he or she. But in the West, we've gone absolutely insane with this stuff, to the point that biology no longer matters. Yes, 100% Michael Knowles is correct. Eradicate transgenderism from society and stay the frig away from our children. Let's get back to the video.
I guess I would just broadly say I would tell people the truth. And you get the truth a lot of different places. You get the truth from talking to your friends. You get the truth from talking to your family. You get the truth from talking to a psychotherapist. You get the truth from talking to a priest. You get the truth from talking to your guidance counselor. I don't know. But what we have now is a regime that insists to all of those people that if they do not tell a lie, they will be punished. The parents, the teachers, the psychotherapists, they'll lose their accreditation, they'll lose their license. And so I would not only encourage the culture to change, I would also change the law back to what it had always been.
What do you think the harm is to society in indulging in that? Because my belief tends to be, if it doesn't affect me and it makes someone happy, I don't really care. If someone wants to wear a suit every day, it doesn't impact me whatsoever. If they want to wear a dress every day or dress, one gender, it doesn't affect me. So it's not really something that, I'm all for whatever makes people happy. How do you believe that is a detriment to society?
Well, society is not just about you, right? Society is about all of us.
Correct.
So even your premise, which is that leave me alone, you do what you want to do, I do what I want to do, we have nothing to do with each other, that is the negation of society, right? But furthermore, the premises are off because you say, well, if it makes someone happy, it doesn't make them happy. Happiness is not merely a subjective question. The anorexic might think that starving herself makes her happy. She'll tell you that, but it doesn't. That is not conducive to human flourishing. So that would be the first issue. The second issue then is the real harm felt by other people. I don't know, when big husky Hank walks into your little girl's bathroom, that's a problem. That damages her. It's scandalous. It's traumatic, and it can lead to sexual assault. And it has. This is what got Glenn Youngkin elected in Virginia. The Loudoun County schools had a transgender bathroom policy, and so some very confused young man went into a girl's bathroom and raped a girl. And what happened? What did the school do? They covered it up. Why? Because it was politically dangerous to touch the trans issue. So what did they do? They sent the kid to another school. And what did he do? He did it again. And what did they do? They covered it up again. So, for the victims of those people who were in harm's way because of trans bathroom policies directly, that would be a harm to society. The libertarian view that you've just articulated, which is, well, leave me alone. You do you, I do me. No one really believes that. You might not care about politics, but politics cares about you. You might not care about society. Society cares about you. We are not free-floating atoms in outer space. Man is a political creature. We are born not primarily with rights and entitlement, but primarily with duty and obligations. You didn't choose your life. You didn't choose how you came into the world. You're not going to choose, hopefully, how you leave the world. And so we need to recognize that we do all live together. We have to figure out how to live together. And we can live together either in accordance with truth that we can all perceive using our reason and objective reality, or we can live according to some kooky narrative of lies that we're constantly rewriting, where no one ever knows what everyone accepts and where the ground is basically quicksand.
So if you think the people that believe the opposite of what you believe are really suffering, do you think that saying something like they subscribe to a kooky narrative of lies is something that's going to flip a switch in their head and think, oh, okay, maybe Michael's right and I can change my ideology? Or do you think that it puts them into a position defending their ego or their idea of who they are that maybe it wouldn't be productive to defend in the first place? Because I think if you're really trying to convince the other side, coming at it from an angle of being I understand your plight, I understand the way that you suffer, and I understand your argument entirely, and I respect you for having said opinions, right? But I have my own, and these are what they are, rather than from a more aggressive angle, because I see these kind of these debate, aggressive undertones, which I see in everybody, right? The left and the right, 100%. But I do wonder to bring people into the center in some capacity, right? It is better, I feel to not be super aggressive and say that the other person's agenda and narrative is just ideologically inferior, to a supreme degree, right? Especially something that so many people subscribe to.
Yeah, I don't think so. It depends on the context. So you're saying in these debate scenarios, sometimes people get aggressive. Yeah, that's a debate. A debate is not when you're sitting with a loved one trying to persuade them of something. A debate is when you and an opponent are standing on stage. You both have fixed views. You will not convince the other person. That's not your job. You're not allowed to convince the other person. They are there to defend their view. You are there to defend the other view. You are trying to persuade the audience. And so the way to persuade the audience, the people kind of in the middle, I think is through clarity. I think always clarity is charity, but especially during a time of debate. Now, if I were speaking to a trans-identifying person, as I have many times, I would speak very differently. There I'm not having a public debate. There I'm trying to figure out, okay, what has led you to this error? So that I can go in and correct that error. For different people, it's going to be different things. For some people, it might be they fell down a Tumblr rabbit hole on the internet. I talked to one trans detransitioner who did that. For someone else, it might be a childhood problem or a sexual trauma that they'd had. That's often the case. For some, it might be an undiagnosed medical condition like autism. I talked to a girl who nearly transitioned because her doctors told her that she was, or other doctors had told her that she was the opposite sex. And then fortunately, her doctor and her family and her priest said, no, that's not how reality works. And they found out she had undiagnosed autism, and now she feels a lot better. So it depends on who you're talking to.
But even calling it necessarily an error is kind of attacking somebody's belief of who they are, their identity. And I think
no, it's attacking their belief.
Of who they are, their identity, right? Saying that your entire identity is an error, because to them it's their identity,
that they are in error about their identity. That's true, but it's not attacking their true identity. It's not attacking them. I guess that's the distinction.
But to them, that is them.
But they're wrong. Yeah, and you can't convince someone they're wrong by telling them they're right.
Right, of course not. But I'm just saying to call something an error when someone
what should we call it?
A situation, maybe. I don't know.
What kind of situation?
I guess it could be attacking someone's religion, where that's what they believe.
I think that if anything, it's going to ramp up their side of the argument. It's going to make them angry and defending their position even more. I don't think it's going to spur actual change.
If I felt that there was something really wrong or bigoted or mean-spirited or something about my statement that men and women are different, which everyone everywhere has believed for all of history until 5 minutes ago, then I might soft pedal it. So I have nothing but love and charity for them. And part of that charity is telling them honestly what I think. I mean, you just mentioned that it's sort of like attacking someone's religion. It's not sort of, it's exactly like attacking someone's religion. They have a belief about human nature, how man relates to the world, to himself, how the body relates to the soul, that is fundamentally wrong. The Biotapestry, one of the most famous pieces of Western art, says he was comforting them, because to comfort is to give strength. And I think the way you give strength is by telling people the truth and putting them on a path that will be conducive to their flourishing and happiness. That's the traditional view. The traditional view in our civilization is the truth sets you free and lies will deceive you and lead to death. The way the modern libs talk about it is that they want you to believe that lies will set you free. Oh, just let them live in their lies. Who cares? It doesn't harm you. It doesn't hurt your bottom line. Just it makes them happy. That the truth can be so harsh and cruel and actually harm people. It's a total inversion.
Now, let's give these two guys a little bit of a break here, because they're not political guys. And I would like to take a guess that when they're not on their podcast, they're probably just dudes that are dudes. They're finance guys. I've watched their podcast a few times. I've liked some of the guests that are on there. They're entrepreneur and finance guys. They're not political commentators, which works for their brand, right? You want to have the middle ground if you're these guys. That's their shtick. They're not political. You wish that other brands would have done that. Bud Light, John Deere, Harley Davidson. Just sell your shitty beer to everybody. Just focus on making the best motorcycle possible. Never mind the woke stuff. Don't pick a side. Sell your product to everyone. Be apolitical, and that works for a business model. Unless, obviously, you're a political business. Like Turning Point USA, they can't do that. But these two guys, that's what they do. They don't want to alienate anybody. They want to get the most views possible, and I have no issues with that. I would guess they're probably just libertarian dudes having their little podcast here. I don't know how many political guys they get on their podcast, but I would guess that most of them are probably left-leaning, because I would guess that most of their audience is very left-leaning. I would also recommend them, because they're arguing with Michael on this, a great source for all this stuff. If any of you want to go and, dig deep into the transgenderism and, all the laws and all the research and all the data and the studies and the detransitioners, their stories, go to billboardchris.com. Billboard Chris, you can follow him on Twitter. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got all the data on there, all the facts, all the research from around the world. Everything's there, and it is absolutely gruesome and scary. I recommend anybody goes to check that out. Now, Michael said here, and said correctly, human beings have a duty and an obligation to speak the truth, to search for the truth. And that's something that Jordan Peterson famously has always talked about, that if you are going to search for the truth, if that is your goal, you're going to have to risk offending people, and that's just going to be a part of it. Doesn't make you malicious, doesn't make you right or wrong. It just means that if you're going to search for the truth, you're going to have to ask some hard questions, which in turn might offend some people. But not doing that and just focusing on not offending a whole community is what has led to women's sports almost being eradicated, is what is going to lead to things like women's sports being eradicated. Soon enough, men are going to win all the medals in women's sports if we don't do something about it. Look at Leah Thomas, the swimmer. Got to swim. Look at the famous issue with Leah Thomas. Nobody wanted to offend one delusional man's feelings, and therefore this person got to compete with women. But nobody wants to be called a bigot these days, or a misogynist, or God forbid somebody called you a racist because of something you said that maybe you misconstrued. But in 2024, if you're a normal functioning member of society and you get called that and you have a business, you could lose your job, you can lose your livelihood, they can fire you, you get, quote unquote canceled. It's unbelievable. Now, the next part is where Michael really triggers these two with the word gay. And I just want to say one thing. If you're a dude, if you're a guy out there and you're, I would say, above the age of 20, you've used the word gay in your daily life with your buddies, joking around. We've all done it. Men do it. Oh, that's gay. This is gay. We've at some point all done it. Your buddy does something and you say, oh, this is how I know you're gay. Or do you know how I know you're gay? No malicious intent. People these days are just too sensitive. Let's get into it.
Brian, well, he's probably more correct than them on some basic things. Brian said he didn't want to get married. So you don't want to get married. That's gay. I don't. I'm making this accusation a lot now.
Why do you keep using that term?
I'm like that guy.
That's a not very inclusive term. You know that.
It's very inclusive. There are a lot of gay guys.
Gay?
So I'm including them.
Why can't you just say you disagree?
Because I disagree, but specifically I disagree because that view is gay.
Right, but okay, but the problem that I have with calling something...
Why are you gay?
Why are you gay? You are gay.
Well,
you are gay. Like that guy on the Ghana.
I have a problem, I feel like, with at least if I'm trying to understand your motive, like your desired outcome of going on these shows and speaking the truth or whatever, your truth, whatever you want to call it, I don't think it's going to yield good benefit or desired results if you say things are gay in a derogatory way. Because it's not like someone maybe who's gay is going to hear that and they're going to be like, oh, this guy, he thinks all gay people are bad. Or,
listen,
you know,
I'm an icon of the gay community. You know,
I
have plenty of friends. Look, I lived in New York. I lived in LA. I went to the gayest university on
what university?
Earth, Yale.
Okay.
So they say 1 in 4, maybe more at Yale. You know, and I have a disproportionate number of homosexually identifying friends and people with variously eccentric views. But you know, my view is that we shouldn't recommend the LGBT activism. I think that's not a good thing to recommend.
But it's not recommending that. It's just, like I said, if your desired result is to hopefully find a middle ground where you can both agree on something.
No,
or
my desired result is to arrive at the truth. That's my desired result.
But don't you
is it for yourself or to help other people arrive at the truth?
For everybody.
But if you're trying to help other people arrive at the truth, calling something gay in a bad way in front of another gay person, I'm not even saying
it's really good. I think it's really good to do because
I think people they recoil when you attack at like
maybe you recoil. I don't think a lot of other people.
I think a lot of people.
I think a lot of people grew up on the playground saying, hey, that shirt's really gay, ha ha ha, and then everybody laughs. I think everybody used this kind of language until 5 minutes ago, and in no way is it mocking or attacking any people who have kind of eccentric sexual desires or anything like that. But I think it's just kind of gay.
But even if it alienates,
I think this whole conversation.
But imagine
these two said to Michael, they said, well, if your desire is to find the middle ground, that's not how you go about it. Michael snapped back at them a little bit, not snap back, but he corrected them and said, no, I don't care about the middle ground, boys. Could care less. I desire to find the truth, and this is why I speak the way I speak, and this is what I do, and this is why I do what I do. My desire is to know the truth and nothing else. There's a lot of times in life where finding a common ground or finding a middle ground is a good thing, and probably should be the desired results in many cases, but not all cases. And when you look at conservatives throughout history and throughout the last 20 or 30 years, we've been very bad at this. We give and give, and we give a little bit to find a middle ground, and then we become the victims of these stupid laws because we're always trying to play the give and take, but we end up giving a lot more than we take. But there is no middle ground. Let me be clear about this. There is no middle ground to be found when it comes to women's spaces and when it comes to transitioning young kids and when it comes to protecting our children. There is no middle ground. I've read the papers. I've went through the research. I spent more time reading about transgenderism and detransitioners and going through the data and going through the research to know that feeding into their delusion doesn't help anybody. You don't fix a problem with the mind by altering the body, but there is no literature out there, none, that says that treating grown men like women, even though they say they feel like women, and no grown man knows what it's like to feel like a woman. You'll never be able to give birth. You'll never have a period. You don't know what it's like to feel vulnerable like that. The same way no woman knows what it's like to be a man. You don't know what it's like to walk around when you're 20 years old, horny all day, full of testosterone. Women don't know that nobody cares about you in society if you're a man, how the system is a little bit rigged against you these days and the laws don't favor you. Nobody cares about a man's feeling. Women don't know what that's like. If you're a woman, you're going around society, you're treated like a goddess all the time. No matter where you go in the world, people are going to treat you way better than they're going to treat men. The two genders, the two sexes don't know how the other one feels. To say you feel like a man, you feel like you're a woman, you don't know. The left feeds into their delusion and thinks that's helping them. It is not. There is no middle ground here unless the middle ground is agreeing that this is a mental illness issue. Let's get back to the video.
Alienates 1 or 2% of the audience. Is that worth it?
In this case, I'm using it in a very specific way and intentionally, much as I would use the word eradicate at my CPAC speech with regard to transgender ideology.
So it's
I'm using it
attention.
No, that's what the liberals accused me of, but that's because they have difficulty understanding words. The reason I use the word eradicate there is because I specifically was referring to uprooting an entire ideology, root and branch. And the reason I use gay specifically in this case is one, because it's kind of funny and we've all used it, even though we all politically correctly now pretend that we don't. We're all clutching our pearls. But the other thing, we all pretend that the homosexuals are offended by it. They're not. Homosexuals are outrageous people a lot of the time, and they're men a lot of the time, and they're tough guys. It's like macho men in the Village People. The reason I'm using it specifically here is because gay refers to an entire view of the sexual ethic. A view of the sexual ethic that views men and women as indiscernible and substitutable for one another, and a view of the sexual ethic that is ultimately sterile, that separates means from ends. And so I'm doing that very intentionally.
You're doing using the esoteric way, right?
I don't think that's so esoteric. I think it's playing on the proper meaning of the word, and it's showing people the issue from a perspective that has been kept from them.
But when you just say the word gay, without any context behind it, people are not going to put that meaning the way that you meant it. They're not going to do all the background thinking of, oh, he means it like this, and if you extrapolate to this.
But when I use a word that everyone used until 5 minutes ago, that now the politically correct censors won't let us use, when I use that word, what I am saying is I will not ascribe to your left-wing censorship regime. And you're right, it might put some people off. It'll at least raise their eyebrows, even if they're not offended. I don't think many people are actually offended by it, but it'll raise their eyebrows at least at first. But the consequence of that will be that it will start to crack away at the left-wing censorship regime, which uses a cycle of euphemisms to constantly change the words that we're allowed to use for anything.
I would disagree. I think it would cause a lot of people to check out immediately. They would hear you saying something like this and immediately think, oh, it's one of these guys. Anything he says
my speech has a lot of views on it.
Anything you say after that, then you're going to tune out or not take as seriously as saying, I disagree with the concept of marriage because of this. To me, that sounds a lot more eloquent and a lot more sophisticated than saying, oh,
and understanding, which is, I feel like, the number one thing that you need to be if you're trying to persuade other people.
I guess my evidence to the contrary is I've given many long lectures using very dry language on all of these questions, and you've never seen any of them, and none of those clips have ever gone viral.
So then you have a conversion rate.
It's on those. Not merely for attention. It's so that
your message
important
gets heard.
Point is heard by people in a precise and just way.
But then I think it's also, do you want your message to be heard, or do you want it to impact the people in a positive way that you would like to get your message across? Because getting attention and just saying crazy stuff will get crazy attention.
I don't think I'm saying any crazy stuff. I think I'm saying very reasonable, true stuff.
But just taking to the extreme and saying, I'm going to say something that'll get attention, that will do well on social media, versus I'm going to say something, it's not going to get as much attention, but the people who watch it will take my ideas into consideration. It'll make more of an impact than saying something.
I think that my CPAC speech dominated the national discourse for at least a week after I gave it. And it wasn't exclusively my CPAC speech. It was Matt Walsh's What is a Woman movie. It was the work of TERF radical feminists I'm really not taking credit for all of this. But I do think that my speech at CPAC and the positive way that it was received by the American right and a lot of the American middle, and the screeching, crazy reaction that came from the left and the lies that came from the establishment media, helped to expand the window of discourse and helped to move that issue more in our direction. And it's led to laws that have been proscribing the transgender ideology in public life. So I think it was very persuasive, and it did get people's attention. It did. I actually didn't intend for it to get that much attention, but it did. And I think that's a good thing. And yes, the libs are going to accuse me of all sorts of things, genocide or whatever, but it's ridiculous. You might call it aggressive. I think it's the only option.
I'm not saying that I personally find that aggressive. I'm saying in the way that it's received and digested in the people
This is the key. You think the language is just fine. You probably think
I'm not labeling it either way.
You just said you don't think it's aggressive.
I said I'm not I'd probably be more against it.
But it's at least not aggressive. Or you think it is aggressive.
I think it
or you're just not
is what
the
the impact is, probably.
No, I'm asking what you think, man.
I think if someone told me that, no, I wouldn't be, super sensitive to it.
And I think basically everyone is like you. And I think that we're all just afraid of offending some hypothetical third party that doesn't really exist. And I think that is how the left controls the whole dialogue, because we're all normal guys. And everyone you talk to, even if they say, I'm a gay guy, or I'm a this thing, or I'm a that thing, or whatever. I don't know what language they're supposed to use now, but very few people actually get offended by any of this stuff. It is the fear, the hypothetical fear of offending the other, that keeps us all trapped in this linguistic prison, living in a web of lies, rather than just speaking the truth clearly, truth that we can all basically
I'd like to think that these two guys were not expecting this conversation to go this way with Michael Knowles, who did great on this show. Absolutely loved it. That's why I made the video about it. But I like these two guys. I like their show when they talk to entrepreneurs. Not necessarily them personally, but they're not bad dudes. They're probably like libertarian guys in their daily lives. They're just regurgitating the talking points to not offend anybody. They can't have a guy like Michael Knowles come on there and agree with them. They'll probably lose half their audience. I would guess most of their audience, because YouTube is very liberal. And I think what Michael Knowles said at the end of that segment there, when he said that I think most people are like you. I think we are all trying to be politically correct to offend people that actually don't exist. Most people are not offended by this. And if you are offended by that, you, my friend, have lived a charmed life. You didn't grow up in the 80s. I'll tell you that much. Nothing offends me. Anyways, good video. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, smash that thumbs up button. Consider subscribing to the channel, guys. Help it grow. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate all of you, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace out, everybody.